Hi folks, I'm Randy Beardsley and welcome to the Beardsley Doctrine. Today I want to talk about Article 11 that deals with our endless war and unlimited foreign aid policy. And unfortunately for you, this policy provides another path you can take on your death march. The normal path entails you going broke, paying for illegal immigrants and people's welfare benefits while these same people cancel out your vote. But this path is a bit more sinister, because although it's similar in that you'll also go broke paying for all these wars and foreign aid, you don't have to worry about your vote being canceled, because you won't get to vote at all if your life is one of the ones chosen to be invested, or more bluntly, sacrificed in one of these war-for-profit schemes. And the timing for Article 11, it couldn't be any better, because even as I speak, our government has us involved in not just one war, now two new foreign wars. And true to form, neither one has anything to do with us. Today, these two wars are just draining your bank account. But don't be surprised when it also includes your life and the lives of your loved ones. So how well we support and implement Article 11 may not only be the difference between life and death for your family, but also whether or not you have enough money to bury your loved ones when they send them back in a body bag. So let's talk about Article 11. We reject the notion that endless and expensive foreign wars, foreign interventions, and foreign aid benefit the American people. We demand an end to these failed policies that only create death and misery. And we reject the lies used to perpetrate these war-for-profit schemes. We support a foreign policy that's based on protecting the interests of our citizens in our country. Now, our military and our tax money, per the Constitution, have limited uses. And those uses are to protect our country and our freedoms. But somehow our government believes that our money, just like our children's lives, can be invested in their around-the-world profit schemes. And invest they have. Take a look at this picture on my left. Each star represents a military war or intervention that these people have invested in over the last 100 years. They've invested in death and misery the world over. If there's been a war just about anywhere in the world over the last 100 years, it's safe to assume that our tax money for sure, and our military in most cases, have been used to create and sustain the death and misery. You wonder why the rest of the world hates us? Newsflash. It isn't because of our freedom. And the costs of these wars are horrific. Over 1 million Americans dead. Millions more of our troops maimed, both physically and mentally. Some so severely that about 6,000 veterans a year decide that killing themselves after these nightmare missions is a better solution than living. And the financial costs are bankrupting our country. We spend $800 billion a year on defense, and this huge ongoing expense is another one of the main reasons why we're $33 trillion in debt. To fund this non-stop worldwide war machine, America spends 36% of the world's total defense spending. We're so much higher than everyone else, you've to add up the defense budgets of the next 10 highest countries to spend as much as we do. And in spite of all the problems we have at home that need fixed, our government instead chooses to spend over $100 billion a year to send 200,000 troops to 800 different bases in 150 different countries across the world to defend the borders of those countries. And the long-lasting negative consequences for these countries and our country are severe. But you never hear about them because the government and the media are too busy selling you on their next war-for-profit scheme to talk about the suffering and the death created in the last one. Did you ever notice that a lot of these war-for-profit schemes, they take place in oil or gas-rich countries like Ukraine or Iraq and the rest of the Middle East, although it never seems to help our gas prices. Others take place in areas with large illegal drug production like Afghanistan or Central America. But that effort never seems to reduce the entry of these drugs into our country either. Some make no sense at all other than to create new consumers for our military equipment. Maybe that's the sole reason. Whatever it is, you would think any country with all this investment of money and lives would at least be rich. But we aren't. Instead, we're $33 trillion in debt, because these are bad investments for all of us. But somebody must be profiting from all the money and lives we've invested. It just isn't us. What do we get out of it? A sinking economy, millions of lost jobs, millions who can't survive without welfare, unsafe streets and cities, an unsecure border in this mountain of debt. With these people in charge, it's one foreign policy disaster after another and one loss after another. Geez, these people can't even win a war commanding the best fighting forces in the world. And it's the same outcome for everything these people touch. It turns to, well, failure. And this losing streak has to end. And also in Article 11, you'll notice that I reject the notion that foreign aid benefits us, because it doesn't. But it's still the right thing to do at times. There are disasters worldwide that require our leadership and our help. But most of the foreign aid today, usually about $50 billion a year, but now over $100 billion a year, it isn't related to humanitarian aid. Most foreign aid is used to start, sustain, or expand wars, to prop up corrupt governments, regime change, and in some cases, who even knows why it's given away. And in all of these cases, did you ever wonder why our government, already $33 trillion in debt, takes out another loan that you have to pay for to give our money to these countries, rather than that country getting a loan on its own? If you haven't, you should. Now, the red stars on this world map show popular destination and where your foreign aid money goes. And when you compare it to where our wars are at, you can see that with the exception of our aid in Africa, you only have to follow that money to figure out the location of the next war. Now, why is that? Because the use of our money to meddle in the affairs of these other countries and regions, it sustains and creates imbalances and injustices that ultimately have to be resolved. But unfortunately, our money prevents that resolution, so it often leads to war. Follow the money trail: Europe, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, Ukraine, Israel, and countless others. All recipients of huge amounts of our foreign aid money prior to the conflict, and of course during and after. You see where our money and interference got us. More war, more debt, more lost lives. Now it seems regardless of how often this cycle of death and misery is repeated for our families, and for families across the world, the media is still able to successfully promote these new wars. Using every tactic on the deception checklist, they're able to fool Americans who are still naive enough to get their information from people who don't have an allegiance to their family or our country. But make a note to yourself so you don't forget. Using information from the media to make any decision from people who have no allegiance to your family or your future is a bad plan. I thought more people would have known this by now and found this misinformation intended to fool you or scare you into going along with their next war a little tiring by now. Did you ever wonder if just both groups are bad guys and neither deserve our support? Or they're both good guys with a legitimate dispute? But this is never the case. There's always a good guy and a bad guy. And each new war is like the last one. But we weren't doing anything. The bad guys just attacked us. The bad guys are terrorists and war criminals. The bad guys are coming for your freedom next. In endless heart-wrenching coverage of the suffering the bad guys inflict on women and children. But the good guys, they never harm women and children, even after they blow up whole cities and kill thousands. If any women and children did die, it's because the bad guys killed them themselves or they used them as human shields. And they always provide a platform for the good guy to tell his side of the story. What they never tell you is both sides of the story. Nor do they let the bad guys have a platform to tell their side of the story. They also never tell you the pain and suffering financed with our money prior to the conflict that helped to start it. Nor the death and suffering they are inflicting right now. And they never tell you that the tales they told you to trick you into going along with the last war have since been proven false, just like these ones will. And finally, they never tell you who's profiting from this new war. But one thing you'll know for sure, it won't be you. So you're not unpatriotic or a terrorist sympathizer for not wanting to sacrifice any more of your children's lives or any more of your money on these war-for-profit schemes. Rather, you're smart. But don't be complicit and have the blood of these lost lives in your hands anymore, because you didn't do your part to stop it. Because you can stop it. There is a better way. We can start by doing what world leaders are supposed to do. We should be leading by promoting and mediating solutions that solve the root causes of these conflicts. While war may be an option, it's the last option, not the first. And the only way we're going to do that is to elect leaders that put America and life first. But it's obvious we haven't elected any of those people yet, as both parties' zeal to send your money and your children off to the next war always exceeds their zeal to fix any of our country's problems. So let's bring forward new leaders who will stop investing in the death of our children and instead start investing in their futures. Because the only freedom we have to defend is our own. Now, I'm a strong proponent of defense, but our current defense spending is not only unsustainable, it's not going to be necessary when we aren't investing all our money in creating the conditions for these wars to start in the first place. So the second thing we can do is cut our defense spending, because defending our country doesn't require us to spend $800 billion a year. And when our government isn't spending our money to interfere in the affairs of every country in the world, we'll be safer with a lot less enemies. What do you think of this idea? Let's move our 200,000 troops and 800 bases we have abroad back to our country to defend our own borders. That sounds like a good idea to me. Now, third, foreign aid will be eliminated or close to it. While there will certainly be cases where our leadership will require us to help other countries in times of need, the use of this money to promote and sustain war, regime change, bribery, and manipulation, it'll stop. Instead, we'll use this money to help people in our country. And finally, we need honest reporting by people that have the same allegiance to our country that we have. And this is no easy task, as the money siphoned off our families and off of other countries via these war-for-profit schemes have been used to buy up or influence almost all the media that we have access to. But the best way to work towards this honest reporting, as well as the implementation of this better way, by supporting the principles in this doctrine and by implementing the press plan. The press plan begins to create the foundation. We need to make the changes that will put our family and our country first again. If we work together, instead of letting them divide us, we can stop these war-for-profit schemes. And that will make us one step closer to a brighter future for our families. There is a better way. I'll see you next time.